The Titanic is the world's most famous shipwreck.
The iceberg was enormous.
As it swept past Titanic, the lights of the bridge lit it up, absolutely brilliant white.
This is the story of those who've tried to find it.
First, you got to recognize we're taking a voyage into history.
He had a call name called Cadillac Jack. He loved to gamble. The Titanic was the big one.
He occasionally joked that he was the biggest ship owner in the world, but most of the ships were on the seabed.
It's a story of incredible scientific innovation.
I said, well, I don't have the equipment to do this. And he said, build it.
Nothing like that had ever been done, to my knowledge, in oceanography.
A story of Cold War intrigue.
The primary purpose of the expedition to find the Titanic was not to find the Titanic. It was 100% completely classified.
And it led to one of the greatest discoveries in history.
You had to stay focused. We were looking for something that might be kind of small, and you want to see it when it shows up.
For every generation, Titanic is reborn. When Bob Ballard found the wreck in 1985, this was another whole new chapter.
At the time it was built, HMS Titanic was the biggest ship in the world. And yet, 4 days into her maiden voyage, she collided with a giant iceberg.
The sinking of the Titanic is the world's first global news story. On the night in question, which is the 14th of April, it was a Sunday night. It was incredibly dark. There was no moon in the sky.
The iceberg was enormous. They go hard to starboard to try to avoid it.
As it swept past Titanic, the lights of the bridge lit it up, absolutely brilliant white.
It looks for a second as if the Titanic is turning enough in order to avoid this iceberg, but at the last second, they graze the ship. The iceberg opens up a significant section of the Titanic to the North Atlantic water.
And as soon as this happens, it is mathematically certain that Titanic will founder, that the Titanic will sink.
In 1912, the sinking of the Titanic was considered the greatest maritime disaster in history. And in the weeks that followed, the quest for answers began.
From the first moment that the world realized with horror what had happened, they wanted to find the ship, and they wanted to find Titanic as fast as possible.
There are all kinds of ideas at the time of trying to raise her, involving balloons that can sort of lift up the wreck.
Sending a barge to the crash site, getting a crane with a hook and winding the Titanic up. Other more sophisticated ones later on were using diesel bags, which is slightly lighter than water, to start to raise the Titanic.
But the idea of raising the Titanic was soon abandoned.
Submarine technology in the 1910s can't even really be described as being in its infancy. It's at fetus stage at this point. And it does become clear very quickly that any attempt to find the Titanic is beyond the remit of the technology available in the 1910s. There's also really not as much of an interest in the Titanic for various reasons.
2 years after Titanic's sinking, a far greater tragedy took place.
Titanic disaster is then more or less forgotten because of the First World War.
That level of suffering on that scale dwarfs interest in the Titanic for a very long time. And that continues really through the Jazz Age and the Great Depression. And it's not until the 1940s, 1950s that you see a massive resurgence in interest in the Titanic.
There's this remarkable book that comes out by a chap called Walter Lord, and it's called A Night to Remember. And this is made into, at the time, the most expensive movie in history, premieres to great acclaim. That really reintroduces Titanic to a whole new audience, and it keeps the memory of Titanic alive.
There is a feeling that the generation of the Titanic is starting to die out. There is growing nostalgia in Britain for the Edwardian era and for stories of British bravery and Edwardian stiff upper lip. There is a sense that that world is coming to an end, and the Titanic becomes the arc of that story. And as interest in the Titanic rejuvenates, the final piece of the puzzle, the end of the story, is what happened to the wreck.
Titanic was known to be some 400 miles from land, so she's a very long way from anywhere, which would provide very difficult conditions to finding the wreck to begin with. And the other issue is she's right down at the bottom of a bank, a sea plateau, very deep.
In the early 50s, rumours began to circulate of the first serious mission to find the Titanic.
In 1953, a few newspaper articles start appearing about a salvage firm, Risdon Beasley, attempting to find the treasure of the Titanic, possessions that could have been owned by the very, very wealthy on board, and they're using explosives to try and find the ship. There was an edition of a book that was encrusted in diamonds and gems, so the newspapers are quick to pick this up as one of the things that Risdon Beasley are on the hunt for.
The company was named after its founder, a man with close ties to the British Admiralty and a reputation for secrecy.
Risdon Beasley is something of an enigma. Not very much is known about his personal life, or indeed his working life, because he famously hated publicity.
The only photograph I've been able to produce, which I got from my former boss, was taken off his passport after he died. He occasionally joked that he was the biggest ship owner in the world, but most of the ships were on the seabed. That was the way he was. He was something of a gambler. He was very willing to take a gamble on something to do with wrecks.
He was quite a character, and obviously he knew a tremendous lot about the Titanic, about all these shipwrecks after World War II. I mean, think of all the ships that had gone down and the money to be made for salvage if you went out there.
It seems Risdon Beasley went to Canada with a ship called the Help. This started to interest people who wondered what this ship was doing with these explosive charges. And fishermen and people in Canada could not really understand what this ship was doing. And this is when the stories started to circulate about Risdon Beasley and the Titanic.
The British Admiralty reportedly imposed a security blackout on Risdon Beasley's activities in the area.
People put two and two together. There was this somewhat secretive company. There was this fantastic wreck that everyone knew about, and there was this treasure, the star-studded gems.
It's an inviting idea, a company from Southampton, treasure hunters looking for the wreck of the Titanic. There's enough possibility in the idea that allows us to speculate, indeed, that is what they were looking for, the Titanic.
If the rumours were true, Beasley's mission was doomed to failure.
His locating device, the ASDIC, would not have worked at anything like that depth.
Back in those days, the deepest was about 894 feet. The Titanic was over 12,000 feet in depth. It would have been the most complex, the most difficult salvage ever achieved.
Risdon Beasley neither confirmed nor denied that he was searching for the Titanic.
Of course, to the popular side, there's only one wreck on the Grand Bank, or near the Grand Bank, and that's the Titanic. In fact, there are hundreds of wrecks on the Grand Bank, but they thought they must be after the Titanic. It would be several decades before Risdon Beasley or anyone else could have had the technology available. Remote-operated vehicles, such as the ones that found the Titanic eventually, just weren't developed.
Throughout the 1960s and 70s, several plans were put forward to find the Titanic, but these were later abandoned, largely for financial reasons. Then, in 1979, a man finally stepped forward with a serious proposal. A millionaire oil executive from Texas named Jack Grimm.
He had a call name called Cadillac Jack. He always drove Cadillacs. You know, he loved to gamble. And of course, that's part of the predisposition of an adventurer.
Jack was a successful oil and gas man, and he had lots of money. I mean, he had 300 to 400 wells pumping oil, so his income was pretty great.
He was fun-loving. He loved history. You know, anytime he felt like that there was an adventure coming, his eyes would just dance.
He took that money and he spent it to continue to be an adventurer. He spent everything he had on his searches. One project he was after Bigfoot, and the next time he was after Noah's Ark, Loch Ness Monster. I mean, he loved that.
Jack, how long did you dream about this expedition? You've done many interesting things.
Well, it had haunted me. The story of the Titanic had haunted me from childhood. My mother and father, who vividly recall the great accident. And I was raised with the legend and the story about the Titanic.
He and my brother would always go out to those mines, those abandoned mines, and search and look for treasures. We went up into Nevada, and that was where he found the old newspaper article that showed about the Titanic sinking.
There was a newspaper that was found by he and his son in a mine in Nevada. And there was the report of the sinking of the Titanic. He immediately looked at that and said, well, I'm going to go find it.
We have struck an iceberg, sinking by the head, losing power, cannot last much longer.
When the Titanic went down, nations around the world were stunned. No other modern event has inspired such a steady and overwhelming flow of books and novels and poems and songs and movies. Lost in the depths of a dark and frozen sea, it's captivated the public imagination for decades. And now has inspired a daring team of scientists and explorers to launch an unprecedented expedition of historical discovery.
In early 1980, a millionaire from Texas began assembling an elite team to attempt to find the Titanic. They would be the subject of a major documentary narrated by Orson Welles. The lead scientist was William Ryan of Columbia University.
I started at Columbia in 1962 as a graduate student and have stayed on as staff, ending up going to sea on research ships, probably for 2 or 3 years at sea on ships in all the world's oceans except the Arctic. I came back from an alpine diving expedition on the Galapagos. I was delayed at what was then Idlewild Airport here in New York. To pass the time, I picked up this issue of the New York Times, and reading through it, way in the back page was a tiny little article that a millionaire from Texas was going to search for the Titanic. All I knew was his name was Grimm, and he was from Abilene, Texas. I bought a postcard and a stamp, and I wrote him a postcard. He's a wildcat oil man, very successful, used to taking huge gambles, and he was also a world-class poker player. I knew nothing of his previous famous interest that he was going to find Noah's Ark, or he was going to look for Bigfoot, or look for Atlantis. I learned that all later.
22.5
The search is being financed by Texas oil man Jack Grimm, a daring investor, well known for backing adventurous and difficult expeditions.
And that's one of the answers that we hope to find when we reach the Titanic.
When I got back to my office here at Lamont, the phone had been ringing. It was from Texas. My postcard addressed to Mr. Grimm, Abilene, Texas, had found him, and he wanted to talk to me. I made it clear to him that I was going to bring to him the most qualified professionals in the United States with this near-bottom, deep-toe technology that required to find a very small ship on the bottom of a very deep ocean.
News of Jack Grimm's search for the Titanic was soon captivating the world's media.
It's a big, dark ocean. The uncertainty, if you take
Technological and scientific activities will be coordinated by Dr. William Ryan from Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Geological Observatory.
Circle that radius, the difference of those positions, you have a real piece of real estate the size of Rhode Island.
But behind the scenes, Jack Grimm's team faced a huge challenge: getting hold of the technology needed to search the depths where the Titanic was believed to be.
He wanted to find the Titanic that summer. I said, well, I don't have the equipment to do this. And he said, build it.
I think history should remember Jack Grimm for his spirit of adventure, being willing to take a risk. And he did that over and over again in his life. To be able to say, just do it, we can do it, let's try. And the Titanic search took two unique men getting together and having a can-do attitude and going forward with it.
Well, the big problem was, first it's in 12 to 13,000 feet of water, and that's, we don't have many kinds of surveying equipments that can work in water that deep.
And we built a device in a few months. I called up Mr. Grimm. He was interested. And he said, but I want to do video photography of the wreck. I said, we've never done deep-sea video. He said, do it.
We followed up with a camera system that could also withstand pressures of 4,000 to 5,000 pounds per square inch. Both of these vehicles, both the sonar for mapping the ocean floor and the camera for photographing the ocean floor, had to be tied on the end of a cable, 18,000 feet long, towed behind the ship.
The camera that Jack used, they built that camera and put it together on the ship going to search for the Titanic. It was just amazing.
Nothing like that had ever been done, to my knowledge, in oceanography until that little camera system with little handheld flashes put in heavy-duty housing that could take the bottom of the seafloor pressure. And they did it. It was amazing.
Jack Grimm was confident that his team of experts and their brand new technology would finally solve the mystery of the lost Titanic.
Well, men, first you got to recognize the fact that we're taking a voyage into history, and that's just what it is. Hopefully we can find the wreck and gain access to the purser's office. It's my film. If I wanted to talk on and on and on, I think I will.
Jack Grimm's missions received a wealth of public attention. But this was nothing compared with the attention the Titanic received on its maiden voyage nearly 70 years earlier.
On Titanic's sailing day, which was Wednesday the 10th of April 1912, she was due to sail at noon.
As she gets ready to sail, crowds begin flocking on the quayside to wave her off as she heads off into the great sea. She is a vast ship. She's sparkling white.
The press are interested in this sailing of the Titanic because of how many members of the upper classes will be traveling.
So you have the wealthiest people in the world like John Jacob Astor. You have film stars like Dorothy Gibson. You have tennis players. You have advisor to the President of the United States of America. But you also have some people that are leaving Britain to start a new life in the United States where they think that life will be better for them. So, in a sense, the Titanic is almost like a microcosm of the whole of society in 1912.
At the time that Titanic actually is steaming down what we call Southampton water, the passengers were sitting down to lunch. It was the widest dining room afloat. It was 92 feet wide. It had these white tablecloths. The whole of Titanic is a kind of bespoke, handmade, beautiful craft. And she really gave people the impression of a country house on land. There was a swimming pool, there was a gymnasium, there was a squash court, miles and miles of electrical cables, and lots of hot water pipes and things that people didn't even have in their homes in 1912.
There are concerts in the afternoon and in the evening for first and second class passengers. Everything is going smoothly.
Many people were actually sitting on the deck in the sunshine, reading a book, chatting, drinking tea, coffee, that sort of thing. So it was very relaxed, and really what they were doing was killing time until their next meal. It was really a sort of eating and chatting fest.
The first 2 days, Wednesday the 10th of April and Thursday the 11th, there's really no cause for alarm. No one ever thought that there would be panicked messages going out at 2 a.m., 1 a.m. in the middle of the Atlantic for come quickly danger.
Come at once. We have struck a berg. It's a CQD, old man. We have struck iceberg. Sinking fast. Come to our assistance.
Titanic's first distress message is not sent until nearly midnight, about 47 minutes after the collision. The message itself says, we are the Titanic sinking. Have your boats ready. This is a shock to all of the shipping that hears it on the North Atlantic that night.
We are sinking fast. Passengers being put into boats. Women and children in boats. Cannot last much longer. This is Titanic, CQD. Engine room flooded.
They would then send out the coordinates that they thought that Titanic was at. The trouble was, those coordinates were wrong.
The fact that searches for the Titanic will be starting where the Titanic said it was that night in 1912 means that they are starting in the wrong place. It will unintentionally leave a red herring for decades for people trying to find the Titanic.
In the summer of 1980, when Jack Grimm and his team set off to find the Titanic, they were unaware that an error made by her wireless operators 68 years earlier would make their search that much more difficult.
On July 7th, 1980, a 39-member crew assembles at the Tracor Marine Shipyard at Port Everglades, Florida, in preparation for an historic voyage. Using the most advanced oceanographic equipment available, they will scour the ocean floor in an area 300 miles southeast of Cape Race, Newfoundland, somewhere 13,000 feet below, in the dark, icy waters.
The work of the scientific team would be captured by a documentary film crew, headed by explorer and producer Mike Harris. But the filmmakers and the scientists didn't always see eye to eye.
Mike Harris and his film crew videoed all the activity we did in the lab, launching the instruments and so on. When we arrived in Florida to find that Mike Harris had brought up this monkey that was to come to sea with us, and I guess this was for their documentary film, to entertain. It was supposed to hold its nose as if it was going underwater whenever somebody said to the monkey, Titanic. I said, if the monkey comes, we don't. This is not a circus. We're going out into high seas, very dangerous environment. The Titanic was a graveyard, an enormous loss of life, and it was to be respected. We have to take this with the uttermost professionalism, and that was agreed upon.
With all gear and personnel loaded on board and the technical equipment fully operational, HJW Fay makes preparations to sail.
Have a good trip. Relax. Don't hit any icebergs. Thanks. Steady. Steady. Let's go get her.
Very good, sir.
We're gonna find the Titanic in her cold and lonely grave. Yes, we'll find the Titanic with the cowards and her brave. We've all been told the story of the tragedy and glory of that great ship Titanic. at the bottom of the sea.
Approaching the site historically considered to be the location of the Titanic's last coordinates, the researchers launch a series of 3 transponders. They are dropped into the ocean at 5-mile intervals in a triangular pattern around the site. Once in position on the ocean floor, the transponders will serve as constant reference points for the search operation, as signals are sent out from the ship at regular intervals and then bounce back. This will allow the scientists to pinpoint precise locations of objects thought to be the Titanic.
Lower this boat. There she goes. Let's hope this is not another disaster at sea.
While the team were aware that the Titanic's last coordinates were most probably not accurate, they did not know the extent of the error.
Because of the uncertainties of where the Titanic distress position was, where the lifeboats were, we would have to search an area 30 by 20 miles, 600 square miles. We started the survey of the bottom. The sea mark was towed 100 to 200 meters above the seabed on a 25,000-foot-long cable.
In this animation, a signal is sent out by the ship's echo sounder and then bounced back by the transponders.
And then the echoes came back. If the Titanic was sitting on the seabed and the sound was broadcast to it, its hull would create an acoustic shadow behind it. So we were looking for some high-standing, bright target that would cast an acoustic shadow. We went up past the coordinates that had been telegraphed from the Titanic by Harold Bride that fateful night. Drove for 10, 20 nautical miles. We had encountered an enormous... So we made some passes down the canyon, but no big shadows. There had to be some navigation issue. The Titanic was to change its clocks to local noon at midnight. Maybe there'd been some screw-up on the map of the nautical chart.
William Ryan was right. There was an error on the nautical chart dating back to the 15th of April 1912, when Titanic sent out a distress signal on her state-of-the-art Marconi machine.
The Marconi machine communicated in dots and dashes, which we call Morse code. It was operated by young men at the time who they would kind of be the geeks of today, if that makes sense. And the interesting thing is, they all knew each other because they were all trained in this place they nicknamed the Tin Tabernacle in Ireland.
All of these young operators have a similar sense of humor. There are industry in-jokes, so one of the things they do is that they make fun of the upper classes and the way that they speak to each other. So they use kind of posho RP public boarding school lingo to each other. So that's why when you see some of the transcripts of the Titanic's messages, it will be one of the Titanic operators saying, "All well here, old boy. How are you, old chap? Yes, chap, thank you."
They jokingly called each other old man, and that actually plays out rather interestingly when we come to discuss the actual sinking.
CQD, old man. We have struck iceberg, sinking fast. Come to our assistance. Position, latitude 41.46 north, longitude 50.14 west. Cannot last much longer.
Titanic's distress position is actually wrong. The reason for this is that when the officers on Titanic took the star sights at about 7:30 on the evening before the collision, they all matched, so they knew they were correct. However, Pittman, who's quite a young officer, he makes a mistake of 1 minute in transferring the star sight time to Titanic time. And that 1 minute equated to an error in longitude. This caused enormous problems for the future, because what it did is it effectively gave the wrong map position for where Titanic's wreck would eventually be found.
In spite of the error in the nautical chart, by late July, Jack Grimm's sonar had detected several possible locations for the Titanic.
The canyon had in areas relief of 600-800 feet of vertical relief into which the Titanic could be hidden. In those first 5 or 6 days, only blotches occurred, no shadows.
The amplitudes of the feature look to be quite reasonable.
That's our little
For
banana.
a possible target, right, Chiquita banana.
We would label them target 1, target 2, target 3, target 4.
But the team were unable to confirm if any of these targets were in fact the Titanic. And they soon faced challenges of a different kind.
I don't know, Chucky. You got some small problems. You got a hurricane heading this way and a gale heading this way. I don't know what's going to hit us first. Good, doesn't it? Charming, just charming.
I think that it's hard for people to appreciate how challenging it is to tow a heavy piece of equipment several miles down on the end of a cable in high winds and high waves. It's dangerous for the ship. It's very difficult for navigation.
The weather got atrocious. We recovered the vehicle, weathered out a gale for 2 or 3 days, put the vehicle back down, continued the search, and eventually we had covered not only the whole SOS CQD location, but we covered much of the canyon, and as no real big target with acoustic shadow appeared, there was a bit of a, it'll be on the next watch, it'll be on the next watch, it'll be on the next watch.
The search goes on, while the exhausted crew maintains a desperate night vigil.
William Ryan and his colleague Fred Speece began to wonder if the Titanic was further away from the distress position than they'd anticipated when planning the expedition.
The place at which Titanic thought it was at the time it sent out its SOS signal is right here at this spot we've labeled Site 1. Let's put it with that one build a marker on there. Next nearest ship was the Californian. Titanic could conceivably have been up as far north as here if the Californian's position was right.
I finally encouraged Dr. Speece, let's go further east. Why were the lifeboats found so far east of the CQT position? Totally hypothetical. So we would put one track way out on the eastern edge of our survey box, going from north to south, and off on the starboard transducer. And suddenly was a very loud, crisp reflector. Bang, 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 bang. And then we were past it. When we examined the sonar record, it was a linear object, but only 600 feet long. Titanic was over 800 feet long. It was widely assumed that the Titanic had sunk intact. This object was not the full length of the Titanic. That was a big concern, whatever this object was. I think most pressing, both to Dr. Speece and to Mr. Grimm, was the distance from the distress position. To Dr. Speece, who'd been a submariner in World War II, widely awarded for his duties, who had surveyed for the Navy other sunken ships, a navigation area that large could not have occurred. And to Mr. Grimm, 600 feet was not long enough, and so was written off as perhaps a pile of rocks, scattered debris and rocks. And that was the description of target number 9. So at the end of the expedition, we had 14 targets and none verified. This crisp 600-foot long object is the bow section of the Titanic. We did not know that.
On Jack Grimm's first mission, his sonar passed right over the bow of the Titanic. But this target was written off because at the time, no one knew the extent of the error in Titanic's distress position. And it was widely accepted that the ship had sunk intact.
If you watch any movie about the sinking of the Titanic before the 1980s, they will show it sinking intact. And that was really the established narrative that came out of the inquiries into the Titanic sinking.
At the time it was built, it seemed inconceivable that a ship the size of the Titanic would sink, let alone split in two.
As the Titanic rises progressively over the skyline of East Belfast throughout 1909, 1910, and 1911, the men who are working on it are creating what they know will be the largest man-made moving object thus far in human history.
The ship was utterly enormous. She's 800 feet long. She's 10 decks high. She's got enormous funnels big enough for a train to pass through. They never believed that Titanic would sink. There was a big inquiry into the sinking of the Titanic soon afterwards. During the inquiry, the officers are all asked, did Titanic break in two? Now, possibly in order to protect the reputation of the White Star Line, or possibly because they actually believed it, they say no, the Titanic did not break in two, and their testimony was believed.
That becomes the narrative that is established for years between the sinking and the discovery of the ship. This leads to confusion, however, when it comes to attempts to find the Titanic, because those searching for it are under the impression they are going to find one intact 882-foot object, when in fact that is not how it will look when they find it at all.
In June 1981, 69 years after the Titanic sank, Jack Grimm's team embarked on a second mission to find the wreck. If they found it, everyone assumed it would be in one piece.
We sailed June 28th from Massachusetts aboard the Texas A&M research vessel, the Gyre. She's gallant, and she serves us well, like a faithful Labrador retriever. She wants so much to please.
It's an unprecedented second trip. We've been given a reprieve. We're going back to find it this time. Hopefully we can find the hull basically intact, sitting on its keel on the bottom of the ocean in some 12,000 to 13,000 feet of water. The area we're interested in is this area where we found the 14 targets last year, of which there are 6 high priority. There are 2 or 3 that are outstanding targets. And we will go back to those targets and map them in detail.
We had the right equipment. We had the side scan sonar system. We had the camera system. We had everything we needed. All we needed was good weather and being able to cover all the bases.
Fred Spieth had submitted a proposal to Mr. Grimm that he would use his deep tow instrument. It had cameras and a TV snapshot camera in it, and it had a magnetometer. So if he could get his vehicle to within 200 or 300 meters of one of our targets, he could decide from video and the magnetometer that it was a metal hull, a metal wreckage, or not.
Launching the deep tow takes all hands and the cook. The device is out of harm's way once it is in the water, but each launch and recovery is done much like 2 porcupines making love, slowly and carefully.
Yeah, but number 13, that's the one we're looking at next.
Number 13 is coming up next in a couple of hours.
Yeah, this is really one of our #1 priority targets. Well, this is roughly 900 feet long, and the Titanic was 882. So it's pretty close, and it shows a relief, I think, of 100 and some feet. And in the next 5 or 10 minutes, we're going to be by this with the magnetometer. And it should show up over there on a scale if there's any metal associated with this particular target.
And by one, he visited these targets, and one by one, no magnetic signature, no magnetic signature, no magnetic signature. We ran up and down the canyon floor, no magnetic signature. After knocking off 13 of the targets, he said to Mr. Grimm, "It doesn't exist here."
We have just passed target 13, one of our top priority targets, and there has been no change in the Earth's magnetic field. 13 is a dry hole, so we're heading up the line.
Almost even there.
Everyone aboard relaxes and passes the time on the long stretches between targets in different ways. Jack and some of the men play poker. The days race by, and it feels like sitting in traffic in a New York taxi with the meter running.
Having eliminated all the other targets, the only remaining target was number 9. And there was about 6 or 7 hours remaining before we absolutely had to head back to port. So I said, could we use my camera vehicle and tow the video to the target number 9, way out to the east, beyond your transponder net.
We are launching the video camera sled for its first, last, and only run of the trip. This particular configuration has never been used before, and Dr. Bill Ryan looks on as anxiously as any expectant father in a hospital waiting room. This is a last-ditch attempt to recover some physical evidence of the Titanic, at least for this trip, and everyone knows it and says a silent prayer.
We had live black and white video showing us the bottom so we could put the tow wire up and down to keep the camera just 10 feet or 12 feet off the bottom, and we towed eastward. And about 3 hours into the tow, this object suddenly appears. The camera hits something and it tilts something, and the reaction was, what is this? What happened? Had we hit some big glacial boulder dropped out of one of the icebergs?
The crunch and scrape of hitting something hard, it really couldn't be anything but a man-made object.
We opened the glass sphere, this huge big glass sphere in which held video cassette recorder, and we inserted that into the videotape player.
Everyone who could gathered in the lounge to watch the video, like a bunch of kids around a Christmas tree when the magic moment comes to open presents.
And we had set up a monitor, watching the bottom go by, starfish and brittle stars and little corals, and an occasional rat-tailed fish would swim through the picture.
Really impressed with the way this
Hold on. That was something moved out, yeah.
What was that?
It was dust.
No, it didn't hit the bottom.
Something stirred up.
That's something stirred up, split, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Nope, there's another fish. Upper right, see?
And suddenly, into view, comes this object that we've hit. Somebody shouts, "Play it back."
Oh, there's something there. Look!
And there it was. A few frames of videotape we would look at again and again. Its immediate impression caught the eye and froze the mind.
Somebody in the room shouted out, "That's a propeller blade. That's a propeller blade." And we played it back and called the captain, our men, in to take a look at it. And he said, "Oh yeah, that's the propeller blade of a very large ship."
The scientists are saying, could be. Okay, it looks like a propeller, but we need proof.
Anita took the film, developed a shipboard in our color film processing system, and then made prints and put together a mosaic of the flash, 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 flash.
The camera system was basically dangled like a yo-yo from the ship, and so every single image had a different scale to it. We just had to find portions of the image that matched the portions of the next image and overlay it and get the scale adjusted for that enlargement, and then the next one, the next one.
And that had the shape of the blade of a large propeller. Mr. Grimm was very pleased. He took that mosaic with him upon departure from the cruise.
And it was thrilling to be able to have something for Jack to take home with him that, you know, hey, looks like we probably found it. Let's hope.
All the way back to Boston, the debate continued. Whether the blade we see in this still picture taken from the videotape is the right size and shape to belong to the Titanic. We could not know and did not know until we got home to Texas that on Jack Grimm's desk was this picture of two commercial divers from Scotland, Mr. Simon Martin and Mr. Alec Crawford, with a propeller blade from the Oceanic. This ship, of similar vintage and size in relation to the Titanic, was wrecked off the coast of Scotland 60 years ago. And the similarities between the two pictures speak for themselves.
When Jack Grimm returned, he exclaimed he believed that that was the Titanic's propeller. He was convinced it was a propeller. I think the reaction of the public was interesting, but it was oh hum.
And your camera that you were pulling
just went right over this, bumped over it.
And we didn't know any of this until hours later. So I went back in the summer of '83 to try to confirm that discovery, and we lost all of our camera systems in the storm there and was unable to confirm it.
I stayed neutral because I had no really firm navigation to know where that propeller had been photographed. I knew it was on the transect towards target number 9.
And I think that that was very frustrating to Jack. He really wanted to find it. He thought we were so close. Yeah, he had a hard time with that.
While Jack Grimm did not find the Titanic, his missions uncovered some vital clues.
He didn't find the ship packed in one piece right next to the propeller, but it was his information that was used for further exploration by others.
This is my own opinion, but I think it gave the spot where the Titanic was. And why in the world would adventurers not seek to reveal more of it?
Jack, of course, everybody knows about your wonderful expedition last summer to find the Titanic.
Jack Grimm did not undertake any further missions. He planned instead to dive on Target 9, hoping to find the propeller once again and prove this was where the wreck was located. But before he got the chance, there would be another team who would finally solve the riddle of the lost Titanic. The Titanic is the world's most famous shipwreck.
The iceberg was enormous.
As it swept past Titanic, the lights of the bridge lit it up, absolutely brilliant white.
This is the story of those who've tried to find it.
First, you got to recognize we're taking a voyage into history.
He had a call name called Cadillac Jack. He loved to gamble. The Titanic was the big one.
He occasionally joked that he was the biggest ship owner in the world, but most of the ships were on the seabed.
It's a story of incredible scientific innovation.
I said, well, I don't have the equipment to do this. And he said, build it.
Nothing like that had ever been done, to my knowledge, in oceanography.
A story of Cold War intrigue.
The primary purpose of the expedition to find the Titanic was not to find the Titanic. It was 100% completely classified.
And it led to one of the greatest discoveries in history.
You had to stay focused. We were looking for something that might be kind of small, and you want to see it when it shows up.
For every generation, Titanic is reborn. When Bob Ballard found the wreck in 1985, this was another whole new chapter.
By the 1980s, the Titanic had been lost in the ocean for over 70 years. Several attempts to find it by Texas oilman Jack Grimm had failed. Meanwhile, at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts, one of America's leading oceanographers was putting together a plan of his own. His name, Dr. Robert Ballard.
Bob Ballard is a very energetic, enthusiastic person. He basically commands a room when he walks in, and he entices you to get involved with his projects.
The actual beginning of the quest to try to find Titanic goes much further back.
But, you know, Bob had been looking to find the Titanic for a number of years, and of course there were the previous expeditions to go out and find it that had been unsuccessful.
Since the 1970s, Ballard had been trying to design a device capable of exploring the deepest regions of the North Atlantic, where the Titanic was thought to be located.
Bob was beginning to set up a laboratory at Woods Hole called the Deep Submergence Lab, and he offered me a job. What he had in mind for me was to build Argo and to go look for the Titanic. He told me that the very first time I met him, that that's what he wanted to do.
Stuart Harris's job was to build a submersible device, which Ballard called the Argo. Previous attempts to find the Titanic had failed largely due to bad weather and technical malfunctions at extreme depths. But the hope was that Argo would withstand all these pressures.
They had come up with a concept which they called Argo and Jason. Argo was a kind of unique combination of sonar and video imaging. The idea was that Argo would be a deep submersible platform that is towed from a ship, and that Jason would be a small remotely operated vehicle that would be launched from Argo, actually, and be able to go down and do the up-close and personal kind of filming.
Argo had 3 TV cameras. These were designed to incorporate a live video signal so that you could see in real time at the surface on the research vessel what the vehicle was directly passing over.
Building Argo would require millions of dollars. Without a wealthy benefactor behind him, Bob Ballard decided to seek funding from a different source: the U.S. Navy.
Robert Ballard is most widely known as an oceanographer, an undersea explorer. But it's also an important detail of his character that Robert Ballard is a commander in the US Navy. He strategizes and liaises with the US government. So he absolutely has a foot in a military camp and a foot in an academic camp. He is both an oceanographer and a naval officer.
Bob was able to get his projects funded by the Office of Naval Research. They were very keen on helping Bob work on Argo Jason because they saw it as a deep ocean asset that would be useful to the Navy as well.
The Argo was of great interest to the U.S. Navy. They saw the military applications and the potential for searching for things such as lost submarines.
Ballard is operating in a time when the military-industrial academic complex is a core component of US foreign policy, that the Pentagon will pour money into technological developments in areas where it can see a dual-use technology, where developments of technologies that might be for civilian purposes will also have enormous military benefits. So he approaches the Pentagon with a pitch to use this technology to find the Titanic. Ultimately, the Navy is not interested in the search for the Titanic, but for the strategic reasons of needing to locate 2 lost submarines, the Navy decides that they will meet Ballard's proposal, but that the search for the Titanic is a byproduct.
The primary purpose of the expedition to find the Titanic was not to find the Titanic. It was to go survey the wrecks of the 2 U.S. Navy nuclear submarines. Both the USS Thresher and USS Scorpion were attack submarines. They were basically hunter killers. Their job was to hunt Russian submarines, detect them, track them, make sure they didn't pose a threat to U.S. ships.
Ballard had approached the Navy to fulfill his dream of finding the Titanic. Now, he found himself in a Cold War game of cat and mouse in which the stakes couldn't be higher.
For 20 years, the Soviet Union has been accumulating enormous military might. They didn't stop when their forces exceeded all requirements of a legitimate defensive capability.
1982 is a period of heightened tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, broadly referred to as the New Cold War. Bomber fleets and intercontinental ballistic missiles grew in number on both sides. Submarine forces were built up with the primary goal of hunting and destroying, if necessary, Soviet vessels.
Submarines at the time helped maintain the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. They had their ballistic submarines within the range of our cities. We had our submarines in the range of their cities. The USS Thresher disappeared in 1963. They surmised quite quickly what happened to the Thresher. Apparently, it was a faulty pipe that started leaking. The Scorpion is still hotly debated about what really happened there.
The Scorpion was deployed on a mission to observe Soviet naval forces. During this time, it was lost. And a mystery surrounds exactly what caused that.
Then you have more extreme conspiracy theories that it was sunk by the Soviet Union, either because the Scorpion was getting near their fleet and posing a threat, or it was done in retaliation.
Alongside the tragedy of losing 2 cutting-edge military vessels and all hands on board, If the Soviets had developed technology that allowed them to trace these submarines, if they had been destroyed through military action, then it could mean that the covert nature, the secretive nature of US undersea activities was actually exposed. So the entire balance of terror upon which the Cold War rested was at risk unless they could confirm that the Soviets were not able to locate and find these submarines.
They basically bookend the Titanic. They were close enough to be part of this operation where they could be surveyed while the claim was that there was a search for the Titanic. Depends on what version of the story you want to believe. Either Robert Ballard came up with this idea of the search for the Titanic as the cover story, or it was the Navy that realized, hey, this is an opportunity. We'll fund this expedition, and it will provide the cover we need to go look at these submarines.
His primary responsibility is to find the submarines, and with any time remaining, having achieved that objective, and any resources remaining, he can then use that to find the Titanic. So it is predominantly a military salvage mission that then, as a byproduct, can become the search for the Titanic.
Oh, it was 100% completely classified, and it remained so for about 20 years. That's when the world learned that the discovery of the Titanic had actually been a ruse to go look at these submarines.
By 1984, with funding from the US Navy, Robert Ballard had built his deep-water submersible, the Argo. He must use it to examine the wrecks of 2 nuclear submarines located in the area where the Titanic sank. To fulfill his ambition of finding the Titanic as well, he realized the Argo alone may not be enough. So he enlisted the help of the French Marine Institute, Ifremer. Bernard Pilot has never spoken about these events before.
Oui, ça m'intéressait en tant que chasse aux épaves. Parce que c'était quand même une épave qui avait du renom, il y avait quand même été une grande catastrophe pour la navigation de commerce, une grande catastrophe également pour l'ingénierie nautique de l'époque. C'était une mission pendant laquelle on avait de bonnes relations avec les Américains avec lesquels on travaillait, sur la découverte du Titanic, Ballard et Woodsall.
So the collaboration with Ifremer came about pretty naturally. They had just developed their very sophisticated side-looking sonar system, which they called SAR.
Ifremer also had the wide area search technology, which Woodsall didn't have at the time.
On tournait avec un sonar latéral qui éclairait à peu près 400 mètres de chaque côté du corps remorqué, mais qui ne pouvait détecter que des gros trucs.
If the French had found positive indication of where the wreck was, then we would come in with Argo and just do video and film survey of the wreckage.
While the search for the Titanic would be a joint US-French operation, Ifremer were told nothing about Ballard's secret mission for the US Navy.
The French team were kept in the dark about this whole project. I think to any observers like the Soviets that, oh, the US and French are working together, that means they must really be looking for the Titanic and not doing something, covert.
Avant même qu'on se lance dans la recherche, bien sûr, on avait fait la recherche sur dossier historique, pour essayer de définir une zone de recherche sur laquelle on avait une probabilité de trouver l'épave, parce qu'évidemment, on n'allait pas explorer tout le fond de l'Atlantique Nord.
In order to narrow down the search area, the French team carefully examined every aspect of the tragic events that took place over 70 years earlier and led to the sinking of the Titanic. When the Titanic left Southampton Dock on its fateful voyage, no one believed it could sink. Least of all the man at the helm, Captain Edward Smith, probably the most famous sailor in the world.
Captain Smith is a selling point for the Titanic. There are some first-class passengers who like him so much that they'll only travel on ships that he is in command of.
Captain Smith
highest paid sailor in the world, and known as the millionaire's captain, nicknamed EJ, known to have a quick smile, ready with a story.
The other thing about Captain Smith is he liked speed, he liked going fast. The officers said it would make them fairly flush with pride as he conned his ships up New York with a foot to spare at the bow and a foot to spare at the stern.
If you look at interviews he makes, even 9-10 years before the Titanic, he says that technology has taken us beyond the point of dramatic shipwrecks, and it does seem as if Smith has been rendered a little bit too complacent. He is too confident both in his own capabilities, his own track record, and of course in the technology that he believes has rendered ships like the Titanic close to unsinkable.
About 6:30, after sunset, Titanic entered a very cold part of the North Atlantic. And from this moment on, they knew they might encounter ice.
It was a Sunday night. It was incredibly dark. There was no moon in the sky.
It is an exceptionally calm night, so there's no wind or breeze that is breaking waves around the base of the iceberg. That helps them become easier to spot. Everything has conspired to make this iceberg difficult to spot.
There was so much ice in the area where Titanic sank that it created a very thin band of haze all around the horizon, and this reduced the contrast with the berg. And so therefore, instead of the berg being seen a few seconds earlier, it was only seen about 50 seconds before the collision.
The fact that Captain Smith hasn't slowed the ship down means that they are dealing with something that is going to take them longer to spot on a ship that is moving too fast to spot it in time. When Frederick Fleet looks out and sees an iceberg dead ahead, he rings the bell. He also calls down to the bridge to say the famous words, "Iceberg dead ahead, sir."
He communicates with them using a telephone. The quartermaster, the man steering the ship, Robert Hitchens, he attempts to avert disaster.
The iceberg was enormous. They go hard to starboard to try to avoid it, and it looks for a second as if the Titanic is turning enough in order to avoid this iceberg, but at the last second, they graze the ship. The iceberg opens up a significant section of the Titanic to the North Atlantic water.
Titanic was built to crash at the front and have 4 compartments gone, but this iceberg took 5 compartments.
At least 5 watertight compartments are flooded, and as soon as this happens, it is mathematically certain that Titanic will founder, that the Titanic will sink.
The night the Titanic sank, an event took place that would leave explorers searching for the wreck at a disadvantage for more than 70 years. An error was made when the wireless operators sent out the wrong coordinates for Titanic's position, which were picked up by 2 nearby ships, the Californian and the Carpathia.
Carpathia, in responding to Titanic's distress signal, was going 10 miles to the wrong position, but completely randomly, Titanic's actual crash site happened to be between where the rescue ship was and on the way to the wrong distress position.
The last messages coming from the wireless room play a vital role, yes, in getting the Carpathia too near the site of where the Titanic sinks, but when it comes to people hoping to find the Titanic, there is a much larger area for them to search until they actually encounter the wreck itself.
If Robert Ballard and the French team were to be successful in finding the Titanic, they would need more than just technology. Their search strategy would need to account for the many historical uncertainties surrounding Titanic's position.
The search strategy was based upon the last reported sightings, the last telegraph message that had been sent. It was also based on the sightings of the Carpathia and the Californian, where they picked up the survivors, and the timing of things and what they knew of the surface currents, as well as the subsea currents in that area.
Il avait les positions de ses bateaux, etc., et il en a déduit une zone de probabilité de 10 miles sur 10 miles, dans laquelle il estimait qu'on avait une bonne chance de trouver l'épave.
For the purposes of mapping out a search area, there was another publicly available source containing important clues as to the Titanic's possible location.
Well, men, first you got to recognize the fact that we're taking a voyage into history, and that's just what it is. And hopefully we can find the wreck and gain access to the purser's office. It's my film. If I want to talk on and on and on, I think I will.
Between 1980 and 1983, Texan oil tycoon Jack Grimm's 3 missions to find the Titanic had used advanced deep-water sonar and photographic technology.
We had everything we needed. All we needed was good weather and being able to cover all the bases.
Jack Grimm's expeditions produced a tantalizing possible location for the Titanic.
The search goes on, while the exhausted crew maintains a desperate night vigil.
And suddenly was a very loud, crisp reflector. Bang, 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 bang. It was a linear object, but only 600 feet long. The Titanic was over 800 feet long. And so it was written off as perhaps a pile of rocks, scattered debris and rocks. And that was the description of target number 9. This crisp 600-foot long object is the bow section of the Titanic.
William Ryan and Jack Grimm had a hunch that the Titanic might be located at target number 9. So they went in search of photographic evidence.
About 3 hours into the tow, this object suddenly appears. The camera hits something and it tilts something, and the reaction was, what is this? What happened?
Oh, there's something there.
And there it was. A few frames of videotape we would look at again and again. Its immediate impression caught the eye and froze the mind.
When Jack Grimm returned, he exclaimed he believed that that was the Titanic's propeller. He was convinced it was the propeller. I think the reaction of the public was interesting, but it was oh hum.
And your camera that you were pulling just went right over this, bumped over it.
And we didn't know any of this until hours later. So I went back in the summer of 83 to try to confirm that discovery, and we lost all of our camera systems in the storm there and was unable to confirm it.
I stayed neutral because I didn't know where it was from. I knew it was on the transect towards target number 9.
Jack Grimm did not fund any more searches for the Titanic. So the only people in a position to solve the riddles he left behind were Robert Ballard's US-French team. Had Jack Grimm found Titanic's propeller? What was at target number 9? Could it really be the Titanic? A year before Robert Ballard recruited the French in his quest to find the Titanic, he carried out a top-secret mission for the US Navy. Using his submersible, the Argo, he covertly surveyed the wreck of a downed nuclear submarine, the USS Thresher. Little did he know, but this mission and his later survey of the USS Scorpion would provide a vital clue in the search for the Titanic.
The first thing Ballard did was to survey the Thresher to make sure that there was no fissile material leaking from the reactors or the weapons.
We arrived on scene and launched Argo. My role in the whole expedition was to keep Argo running and running well. And so my focus totally was on keeping the cameras running, keeping the sonar running, keep the lights running.
It's just really eerie to see this thing sitting on the bottom of the ocean, knowing that it brought all these men to their death. During the investigation, they found that the problem was likely faulty piping, which short-circuited some of the electronics and shut down the reactor. Without the reactor, there's no propulsion. And without the propulsion, the sub began to sink. It fell below crush depth and imploded.
While surveying the debris from the implosion, Ballard noticed something that called into question the received wisdom about searching for a shipwreck at these kinds of depths.
Because nobody had ever been able to see the effects of a violent decompression at such great depth of something the size of a US Navy attack submarine, the sight of what it does to a vessel was new, was brand new to Ballard. The shape of the wreckage, what was left, where the damage occurred, how the hull had decompressed and split up, the sections it had broken up into, all of this was new.
Both the Thresher and the Scorpion imploded, and that's kind of like if you have a bag of potato chips or a bag of crisps, and you start squeezing it, you start applying the pressure, eventually it's going to burst, and you're going to crush everything on the inside, and bits and pieces are going to be ejected through the openings.
And what Ballard's team is able to develop here is the technique in which they use the debris field that is created. Rather than having to find the single wreck, which occupies a very small space on an enormous seabed, you can use that debris field and trace it and follow it in real time through these lenses and use that to locate where the primary wreck is.
And when he noticed these debris fields for the submarines, he applied that to the search for the Titanic.
Ballard's theory was that if something as robust as a nuclear submarine had imploded at these depths, could the same have happened to the Titanic? If so, it too may have produced a debris field which Argo could follow, and that might lead him to the wreck. This would be even more likely if, prior to sinking, the Titanic had split in two and not sunk intact, as many eyewitnesses claimed back in 1912.
Titanic was such a big ship that really how people perceived the accident and the disaster was different depending on where you were in the ship.
The lounge or the reception room closed at 11 o'clock every evening. The smoking room is allowed to stay open until midnight, which means it's the only public room still open on board when the men in the smoking room feel a slight shudder at about 20 minutes to midnight. That is the Titanic hitting the iceberg.
Other passengers heard a sound like running over shingle on a beach. Some described it as tearing a piece of calico, or perhaps we might think of it as a piece of canvas.
The calmness of the reaction belies the seriousness of the situation.
At this point, Captain Smith obviously came running out onto the bridge immediately and said, "What's happened?" And Murdoch said, "We've struck ice and I've shut the watertight doors." Captain Smith immediately called for the carpenter and Thomas Andrews, the designer, and they went forward to what's called sound the ship.
Andrews' first moment of feeling genuine panic that something might be seriously wrong is when he gets to G-deck and to the mail room, and he sees the clerks dragging sacks of letters away from incoming, trickling in seawater. He sees the water coming in and he's able to do quick calculations.
Thomas Andrews then returns to the bridge, having inspected the damage to Titanic. And Captain Smith can't really believe what Thomas Andrews tells him. The devastating news that neither of them would ever have expected in their wildest dreams. He says the ship has about an hour and a half to live.
Once Smith has received what is essentially the Titanic's death sentence, a surreal period of faux calm seems to settle over his actions and the ship.
Passengers were asked to get out of bed, get dressed, dress warmly, put life belts on and go up onto the freezing decks. And they thought this was a real pain. They wanted to be in their warm bedrooms. They never believed that Titanic would sink.
The first-class lounge is opened up by a well-meaning ship official so that the first-class passengers can be warm while the lifeboats are prepared. So they decamp in there. The band arrives to entertain them. Then other stewards open up the bar in the lounge. They're serving brandy and hot cocoa.
Initially, people probably think that it's something of a drill, perhaps. Of course, as the ship sinks lower and lower down, it is crystal clear what is going to happen. And it's at that point that panic begins to set in.
As Titanic's decks sink lower and lower, because the water's flooding in the bow, people start quickly to realise it's a very urgent situation. So having found the lifeboats very difficult to fill at the beginning, they're then having to overfill them and rush them at the end.
At one point, one of the officers manning the lifeboats had threatened to shoot any man that tried to rush on board again, ahead of women and children.
There are reports, for example, of First Officer Murdoch shooting some people who were trying to storm the lifeboats, and then he turns the gun on himself and he gives a salute. So it all becomes really like a living hell.
Many men are becoming concerned about getting their wives and children into the boats, and you do see some genuinely remarkable moments of courage. Isidore and Ida Strauss, they were the co-owners of Macy's department store in New York, declined to get in the lifeboat. Mrs. Strauss would not leave her husband. She said they had lived together, and if needs be, they would die together. Benjamin Guggenheim famously said he was going to dress in his best and go down as a gentleman. That's one of the most enduring legends of the Titanic.
Thomas Andrews is trying to be as helpful as he can because he knows there are not enough lifeboats, and he knows they're not going to have time to launch them all before the Titanic sinks.
The last sight that we have of him, we think, is from a steward on board, a waiter on board called Cecil Fitzpatrick. And Cecil sees Smith and Andrews talking together near the bridge just before the Titanic starts to go into its real final plunge, when the two of them are swept overboard and never seen again. Their bodies aren't recovered. The Titanic split as it sank, we now know, between the second and third funnel. But it happened after the electricity had failed, the lights had gone out, there is no moon. So essentially these people in the lifeboats are looking at a darkened skyscraper disappearing in the gloom in front of them.
She splits in half, and then the lights go out, and then the cries happen. And tragically, everyone in the lifeboats thinks that there's no one left on the ship, that there was always enough lifeboats for everyone. So they can't understand where these cries from 1,500 poor souls are coming from. And the whole thing suddenly dawns on them that they've actually been immensely lucky to be able to get into a lifeboat, and that they're actually witnessing one of the most terrible tragedies of modern times.
Armed with the theory that the Titanic may have created a debris field on its way to the ocean floor, Ballard and the French adapted their search strategy into what they called the two-stage approach. The French would first use their sonar to try and find the wreck from their research ship, Le Suroît. Ballard would then join them and use Argo to search for a debris field on board the US ship, the Nore.
L'opération devait comporter 2 mois de recherche, tous les deux mis en œuvre par le Suroît, suivi de 1 mois de recherche avec le Knorr et sa caméra pendulaire. Avant d'être mobilisé sur Titanic, le Knorr était mobilisé ailleurs sur d'autres missions, donc il ne pouvait pas le faire avant.
The other mission was top secret. It was to survey the wreck of a second nuclear submarine for the US Navy, who had paid for the technology Ballard wanted to use to find the Titanic.
The US Navy, in a degree of tit-for-tat with Ballard, makes the deal that ultimately, once he is able to locate the Scorpion, any remaining time and resources that were allocated to that mission can be diverted to his search for the Titanic.
La mission du Suroît était de remorquer le SAR et de quadriller la zone, quadriller en tout petits morceaux avec ses 400 mètres de distance de détection, de quadriller la zone jusqu'à ce qu'il trouve quelque chose de gros. Et on a commencé à balayer ça. Donc ensuite, en plus, on a eu beaucoup d'ennuis de matériel. Parce que les conditions ont été particulièrement dures, sur les conditions météo, je veux dire, ont été particulièrement dures pendant cette période.
We did have a lot of rough weather, and I remember a few days where we weren't able to do anything but basically just try to stay in your bunk and not get rolled around the ship.
C'était la toute première plongée du SAR sur l'opération Titanic. On a mis le SAR à l'eau, On s'est aligné pour faire la première passe et on s'est fait un peu embarquer par le courant et qui nous a un petit peu dévié. Donc ce qui fait qu'on a raté le petit coin en haut de la zone. Au lieu de revenir pour le rebrosser une deuxième fois, on a plutôt fait continuer à chasser du côté de la grande surface qui restait en disant bon quand même, eh ben on a eu tort. On a eu tort parce que l'épave s'est révélée ultérieurement être à peu près dans ce petit coin qu'on avait un peu raté.
And unfortunately, the SAR vehicle went over the debris field and worked its way further and further away with every turn in mowing the lawn.
On a fait 2 missions d'1 mois, une en juillet, une en août. On n'a pas trouvé.
It was left up to the Argo system to go and try to fill in the rest of the box and find the wreck site. We all knew that we were trying to get the work done at the Scorpion site done as fast as possible so we could go to look for Titanic. Argo would not have been able to cover that much territory in the time available. So having Euphemer eliminate maybe 70% or so of the search area was huge.
Building upon the experience he had in the search for the Thresher, Ballard is able to find the Scorpion with 12 days remaining, which he can then allocate to the search of the Titanic.
With the clock ticking, the French and US teams join forces on board the Nore. If they're going to find the Titanic, it's now or never.
Lorsque le Knorr a commencé sa mission, il y avait toute la zone qu'on n'avait pas couverte, c'est-à-dire le petit coin et un tiers à peu près en bas.
What we ended up doing with the Argo system is not necessarily following the track of just mowing the lawn, but the line spaces were increased in order for us to be able to look for debris and not for the shipwreck itself. The line spacings were spaced further apart.
Myself and the small team of people that we had that were in charge of Argo or supporting Argo, working 18 hours a day.
All the watch teams were suffering after a day or so of boredom of watching mud go by for 8 hours a day on TV. Probably some of the worst produced television ever. People would get excited if we saw a rock or a fish or something. There'd be cheers, you know, just seeing something different. So it was very, very boring work.
We started giving ourselves nicknames. The Midnight Watch crew was the team of quiet excellence. So, you know, drinking lots of coffee and telling jokes, but, you know, you had to stay focused. We were looking for something that might be kind of small, and you want to see it when it shows up. That happened on the night of August 31st. I came on shift at midnight, August 31st, so it was going into the September 1st. It was just another shift. Not long after midnight was when we first saw the first hints of debris. And literally it was, that's not natural. That's something that's man-made. And then it's gone.
When we started seeing debris or wreckage on the seafloor, we knew that there was something nearby that was big that these objects had come from.
Basically, everybody really got perked up at that point because we knew, okay, we're in a debris field. We're seeing debris. I think it was probably around that time we said, somebody should go wake up Bob.
During this debate, the chef came in to see if we wanted anything, and he saw what was going on, and he went and got Bob.
When Bob showed up, we were just coming around for another track line. It was not long after he got there that we went over top of one of the boilers.
La chaudière, c'est énorme. Faut bien penser qu'il ne s'agit pas de la chaudière de l'appartement, hein. C'est une chaudière qui fait au moins 10 mètres de haut d'un seul coup.
When we first passed over the boiler, everyone was screaming, boiler, boiler, it's a boiler. Everyone knew about the photograph in Walter Lord's book about Titanic, had a picture of the boilers before they were installed. So everyone knew that that boiler was from Titanic.
At that point, we knew. We did it. We found it. And my comment was, bingo.
When Bob came in the control van, he was excited. I think he shouted, "The sucker exists," or something like that. He was very, very excited. We had found Titanic, and everyone was very excited, and there was champagne being served.
C'était hurrah, bravo, on l'a eu, etc. Et après, on a dit, bon, maintenant, il faut investiguer un peu, et on a continué à chercher. J'étais en charge de piloter plus ou moins le bateau pour suivre ce que je voyais avec la caméra.
The first image that we saw that really brought home what we were looking at was the bow. The bow was the most recognizable part of the ship.
The atmosphere went from everyone being excited for the discovery to everyone being somber.
We had found the Titanic. It was an achievement. It represents a tragedy. 1,500 people or more lost their lives when that ship sank. When you do see it, you have to realize that what it cost.
Bob Ballard and the French team had achieved what eluded so many. They had found the Titanic. And while Ballard's name is the one most associated with the discovery, it was very much a team effort.
Ephemera made a huge contribution to finding Titanic. Being able to go and eliminate that much of the search area, Argo would never have been able to cover that much ground in the amount of time there was.
Qui a trouvé le Titanic? Alors, qui était de Carrosseo à ce moment-là? C'était moi. Donc, j'ai trouvé le Titanic. Maintenant, qui a trouvé le Titanic? Ballard, Woodsall ou Ifremer? Moi, je dis c'est Woodsall et Ifremer. Ils l'auraient pas trouvé si on n'avait pas défini correctement la zone. Ils ne pouvaient pas promener la caméra sur 100 000 hectares de fond d'Atlantique. C'est pas possible.
For the general public, the discovery was immense. The French-US team had solved a mystery which had captivated the world for nearly 3/4 of a century.
One of the most remarkable things that happened in the whole cruise was how the public reacted to this discovery, which totally blew my mind. When we got back to Woods Hole, the main dock, it was jammed with people. There were thousands of people on the dock when we arrived back home. There was a big banner strung on the main building facing the dock. Congratulations, you know.
Among those who watched the explorer's triumphant return was the US Navy. After all, it was the Navy's funding of Argo that had made the discovery possible.
The Navy was less than happy that they found the Titanic because it brought unwanted attention to the mission and a lot of scrutiny. And some media at the time began to question, like, why was the Navy involved at all in something that involved a commercial passenger liner?
the Navy gets quite nervous about the sorts of questions that might be asked about this technology, about their connection, about exactly why it was that Ballard had developed and was using this technology in the first place.
And of course, the Navy went into a little bit of a panic there and just said this was an opportunity to test these new submersibles, and kind of left it at that. But there was a bit of a worry that the success was going to expose the whole secret operation.
But ultimately, the fame and the excitement around the Titanic is enough that people just look past these questions, and it's not until decades later that people really start to explore this connection between Ballard, a naval commander, and the discovery of the Titanic.
As more details emerged about the final resting place of the Titanic, there was one more mystery that remained unsolved. Was Titanic located near the spot Jack Grimm's team had identified and labeled Target Number 9?
How important do you think your findings were to the discovery now by this U.S.-French team?
I feel they confirmed what I had said all along, that we discovered it in the summer of '81.
Is the site where they found the ship very close to where you expected it to be found?
Yes, we don't have the exact fix on where they found the main body of the ship, but it almost has to be within a mile radius of where we found the propeller. Mm-hmm. Therefore, our cameras just missed the wreck in the summer of '81 and was only able to get about 90% of the propeller.
When they found the boilers and got all excited, and up in the corner of the video frame was the date, the time, the little tiny numbers, and the pressure depths. And it was exactly the pressure depths of Target 9. So he gave me the Titanic on my birthday. Fabulous. Thank you, Bob. And he is to be congratulated because he was the first to actually show that this was, in fact, the Titanic.
Early expedition, they had actually passed right over the wreck of the Titanic and didn't realize it. They found out later when, of course, Ballard revealed the location. And that's just because they were using equipment that was just not as advanced as Ballard was. And Ballard's equipment, like the Argo, which was the key to finding the Titanic.
The discovery of the wreck was one of incalculable significance to studying the history of the Titanic. It answered many questions about the sinking itself, and it provided a massive platform for the development of underwater and submarine technologies.
It brought the subject to the global population for a second time. I mean, you could even argue that even today, over 110 years later, we're still talking about the Titanic, almost as much as they did at the time.
Titanic's wreck site is a very somber place. It's cold and dark, but it's a memorial to the 1,500 people who died.
To me, the sort of hallowed ground is actually there at the surface, because no one died on the seafloor. Everyone died at the surface. And with every expedition I've been out there, it always feels like a different part of the ocean there.